C3, Connecting, Coaches, Cognition, Coaching with Courtney and Christensen. As a busy coach, you spend all day refueling, revamping, and reflecting with educators. Now's the time to stop and recharge your batteries with some much-needed coaching for the coach.
Welcome back to another episode of C3. I'm Courtney Groskin, and I'm here with
Violet Christensen.
Violet. What's new in your world?
Oh, I think I always say it. It's not new, but I have been doing a lot of reflecting lately and just trying to gear up for that last chunk of the school year and try to keep morale high and check things off that list, which is always a lot. And at the same time, trying to balance that with, as we spoke about before, some pause and maybe I got to go on a very small trip and do some self-care. So that was amazing, and hang out with my bestie. And I just think it's that balance of gearing up for the end of the year, but also slowing down to make plans for things for summer and things that we're looking forward to. I know I was looking forward to that trip. And then we were headed to gymnastics yesterday, and the girls and I were talking about like what would make your summer even more happy, and just setting goals of things that they want to do. And they helped me build some big new gardens. So that's been kind of, I'm sure it'll snow, or it'll, like, who knows? Like, we could get like an end of May snow, and I'm still in that place in Colorado. But for the moment, we had at least a couple sunny days that we were able to build it, and was cool to do that with them. And it's weird. I feel like there's been some serendipitous moments lately of me running into educators from my past. As we walked into gymnastics yesterday, one of my teaching partners was there and runs up and gives me a big hug outside the rec center. And I go in and sit down, and there's another colleague who I had worked at with somewhere else. And so I think it just brings me that joy of your journey in education and different roles that you serve, and how that can build such big connections and such a good knowledge base for wherever you're going to apply it. So I feel like I'm in that ping pong, Courtney, of like, school, keep it moving, keep it calm, and keep self-care, and make sure that we are focusing on the listening in this time, and making sure that we're attuning to the time of the year that we're in, and just also honoring ourselves in that process. So, that was my very surface level answer for you.
No, it's a tricky time of year. I think it's you're always juggling things, but as the days feel a little longer with the sunshine, it's like, how many things can I squeeze in? And then, I have to take care of myself and do this and that. But yeah, building out your network and leaning on the people that are good people, and taking that moment to chat and reconnect is always a good thing.
Yeah, it's just, educators are amazing humans. So it's just always fun to find one somewhere, and, in those serendipitous moments. But how is your juggle of this moment going for you, Courtney?
It's good. Finishing up my cognitive coaching agency trainer scripting, and then we'll teach my first round of classes here starting in July. So gearing up for that, and just trying to find the balance this time of year with state testing and all people planning to shift grade levels for next year, of just trying to keep that balance of staying focused and remembering what our school goals are and district goals, and how to keep people grounded in that. And then also find time too for that personal connection of how is life going.
Absolutely. Honoring the human in front of us, but also adhering to that goal and that collaboration moving forward.
Yeah, it's all about finishing strong.
It's a good way to finish. And then all of those breaks and education we get to look forward to are just all the more golden, right?
Exactly. We're so excited to welcome back Christian von Nieuwerburgh. He is a professor, executive coach, and he's internationally recognized as part of the coaching community for his positive psychology. He is known for his work in the fields of educational coaching, leadership development, and well-being. He has authored several influential books, including An Introduction to Coaching Skills and Coaching in Education, Getting Better Results for Students, Educators, and Parents. His research focuses on the impact of coaching in schools and organizations, and he is the leading advocate for using coaching to enhance performance, resilience, and professional growth. Welcome back, Christian.
Christian, we are so lucky to have you here this morning here in Colorado, but we know it's afternoon in England, and we just love being able to go across time and space to connect with you once again. So thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Violet. I'm very appreciative to have this opportunity to talk to you again. and also to share my thinking with your listeners. And Colorado is one of my favorite places. So it's just nice that you're connecting from so far away. But how wonderful it is that we can have conversations like this anytime we want.
Exactly. It's beautiful. So we are just excited to be able to share you one more time, and we want to just jump in. And I know not everyone was here back in the day when we had you the first time. And so we want to just share a little bit of your history with us, if you will, and just tell us how you've gotten to where you are and a little bit about your past in coaching.
Yeah, thank you so much. How did I get to where I am? I think it all revolves around education. That's something that I'm most passionate about. And I'd love to imagine a time when every person has access to excellent education. So that's the thing that's really motivated me. In terms of my personal life, I recognize and appreciate how much having access to good education did for me, the options and opportunities it gave to me. So I was always interested in education. I started my professional career as a teacher, didn't really hack it. I think it was just too tough for me being a teacher. I just couldn't handle the class. The behavior management stuff wasn't really my thing. So when I moved to England, I worked for local government for a little while in the education department. That's for the public education system or the government education system here. And as I was doing that, I discovered coaching. And that was the transformational moment for me. Coaching turns out, for me, is the most respectful way of supporting people's learning and professional development, and the most empowering way of doing that. And once I learned about coaching, there was really no going back. But I guess my question was, how can we use coaching most effectively in educational settings? That was really my starting point. Then I discovered positive psychology, and positive psychology is the science of optimal functioning or optimal performance. And I think that's what we are all about, coaches. As coaches, we're supporting people to be at their best. And I thought, well, here's a science in the study of people at their best. So I guess how I've got to where I am now is by linking coaching, which is a methodology for supporting people to bring about desired change, and positive psychology, which is the science of people at their best.
And we all want to be our best at any time. I love how you can speak so eloquently to it and just bring your journey to light for all of us and say, hey, the classroom was really difficult, and honoring that piece, and also finding ways. My purpose was still there to find ways to help support educators and to help further education for everyone, and just going to that root cause of education makes us all better.
I think for me, Violet, it's that education gives us the tools that we need to
Mhm.
pursue the things that we'd like to pursue on the one hand. And the other is that having an education helps us to overcome barriers that may exist. So for me, that starting point of ensuring everybody has a good education, it's so important for me. But I like what you said there, Violet. There's something about each of us as well, identifying what's the best contribution we can make. And for some people, they're amazing teachers. They need to be in the classroom. Others are amazing leaders and administrators. Others are amazing support staff. So maybe there's an element of that as well. And in my case, I thought, you know what? Coaching is the thing that I can really do well. It really matched with my general approach to life, how I like to be with other people. I love to see people succeed. And, how lucky are we as coaches? That's what we can do, is our jobs relate to other people's successes.
Yeah, that's one of the best benefits of the job is we're there to support them and help them to do their best. Let's dive into your new book. What inspired you to write Radical Listening, and how does it differ from traditional approaches to listening and coaching?
Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, exactly. That's our job as coaches, helping people to be at their best. And it does make me reflect on the importance of us. And I'm talking about our listeners as well, the three of us, but also our listeners, just ensuring that they're taking care of themselves. That's kind of a really important thing that's emerged for me is making sure that we can be at our best so that we're supporting others to thrive. How did I come to radical listening? What a gift of a question that is. I really appreciate that. There's a number of different routes. But if I think about the books that I've been writing, I've really been very interested in coaching, first of all, and the power of coaching. As I said, I'm also interested in positive psychology. And for me, radical listening, this book, is about taking what a lot of coaches already know and sharing it with a much wider audience. Because, of course, as coaches, one of the main things we do is we listen to people. That's kind of the most important thing we do, but we're not the only profession that does that. So many other professional roles could be enhanced by better listening. So on the one hand, I had this focus of how can I share what's most powerful about coaching with a much broader audience. The other is that I've always wanted to work more closely with Dr. Robert Biswas-Diener. He's a really inspiring colleague and friend, and he's written so many amazing books. And I was thinking, I just love some opportunity to work with Robert. And that ties into another thing that might be of interest is, I think one of my biggest strengths is that I'm a learner. I love learning. That's probably why I'm so passionate about education. I just want everybody to have learning opportunities. But since I love learning, I've just found that co-authoring with other people can be so powerful. So the process of writing this book about radical listening has been a huge learning experience for me as well. And, there's a connection to this podcast because I know the podcast is called Connecting Coaches Cognition. The subtitle of our book is The Art of True Connection. So one thing we're trying to say is that listening isn't just a kind of a reactive thing that we do, that in fact it's proactive, and that we can use the skill of listening as a way of connecting with other people. Of course, I already mentioned the link between listening and coaching, which is one of the other words you've got, but also cognition. We would argue in this book that listening radically to somebody else helps them to think better. And so what's radical about this type of listening we're talking about, one of the things that's radical is that we see listening as proactive and as a two-way interaction. Often people think, oh, we're going to go into listening mode. So that means I stop talking, I just take stuff in. But this book is saying that even as we're listening, we're part of that interaction. We're doing things that strengthen the connection. There's ways of listening to people that can demonstrate that you value them or appreciate them. So I guess what's radical is we're saying listening isn't just about taking in information.
I love that active listening piece and you highlighting that, and also the power of the us, of collaboration and someone pulling you forward in your thinking and helping to challenge your thinking. I love hearing that about your co-author. And I know I appreciate that about Courtney all the time. We wouldn't be to this point if she didn't pull our thinking forward. And so just the power of that PLN and being able to enrich us as coaches and as humans is just amazing.
Exactly, Violet. And, that's something for all our listeners out there is really tap into the networks that you have, invest in those professional relationships. They're mutually beneficial, I would say. So those conversations that you and Courtney have, I'm sure, like you say, you kind of support one another, but you pull each other forward. And our teachers, our coaches, our educators, they can benefit from having those kinds of interactions. And there's a funny irony here, I think, which is that sometimes when we would most benefit from those kinds of reaching out to people and having these conversations might be those times we're kind of most reluctant to do that. You know, we've had a bad day. We're kind of, so I guess my invitation is in those moments, you know, reach out to people and connect with them. And remember that I think there's going to be benefits for you and others.
Absolutely, that symbiotic relationship in order to help enhance one another and being able to pull each other forward in our thoughts and the power of a thought partner, right?
Yes.
And we want to hear a little more about that. If you can tell us how coaches can incorporate some of these principles of radical listening and use them truly deeply in their daily practice to enhance those connections. You touched on that earlier, but we wanted to see if we can unwrap it a little further.
Yeah, let's unwrap a little bit further because the radical listening book, our intention has been to keep it very practical. We really want people to go away and take these ideas. And the starting point is we're all good listeners already. So this book never implies that, oh, you're doing something wrong with your listening, especially if you're a coach. We know you're already listening in a way that's empowering and powerful to others. But the book shares insights and practical ideas. So one of the ideas is to, and probably the main idea, Violet, is to start with an intention. So imagine you're just about to go into a scenario where you're going to be listening to somebody even before we get into that conversation. Just take a moment to think, what is my intention as in this conversation? And in this book, we identify 3 social intentions and 3 cognitive intentions of listening, radical listening. The social intentions are connect to, you know, my intention is I want to listen to somebody in order to connect with them. The other is to appreciate them. And imagine how powerful that interaction would be, where you would go into a conversation saying, I'm going to listen to this person with my primary intention being, I want them to know that I appreciate them. And imagine whether that's a teacher with a student, an administrator with a teacher with a colleague, how powerful that can be if the only intention I have is, I want to listen in a way that shows I appreciate you. And then we can listen in a way that influences people. And maybe that word might be a little bit ambiguous, but you know, Violet, when you talked about we work together in partnership to pull each other forward, that's what we mean by influence. We can listen in a way that boosts somebody's motivation, for example, by highlighting, getting excited about things. Now, then there's the cognitive intentions. Those are to understand, and there's nothing wrong with this, but that's probably our default. We think when we're listening, we're trying to understand, but that's only one of the purposes. The other is to solve. And for coaches, we know that that's a big trap, you know. Somebody's coming along and telling us how difficult things are for them at the moment. It's a trap that because we want to help them out, we start trying to solve it for them and we come up with all sorts of solutions where really what the person wants is to be listened to. They're not looking for you to come up with a solution. And the final one, important for me, of course, is the intention of listening in order to learn. Now, just sharing with you those 6 different reasons we listen, you can see that depending on the intention, we're going to listen in different ways. So if I'm going into a lecture or I'm going into going to listen to a podcast, for example, I'm probably better off in listening to learn. Because if I'm listening to learn, I'm listening out for what's the important information, how do I make this relevant in my own life, What can I take away and implement straight away? So this one of the fundamental ideas is start with an intention. What's my intention for this next piece of listening I'm going to do? Another one of the big ideas is notice barriers to our listening. What are the things that can get in the way of us listening to others? And so barriers, I'll just share one or two. I mean, the most important barrier maybe for our listeners is I don't have enough time. So if I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'd love to talk to you, but I don't have enough time, when that's going through our mind, you know what that's going to be like. We're trying to shut down the conversation. We don't want to extend it. We're thinking we've only got 3 minutes. So it's noticing those little things that pop into our head that could be barriers. And we call that barrier time poverty. So this sense of I haven't got time. The other barriers are to do with thinking, I know what's best in this situation. Imagine you're listening to someone and you think, oh, I know what they need to do. So that's solving kind of thing. So another aspect of what we talk about in radical listening is to become aware of internal barriers, barriers that we put in the way of listening in this kind of empowering and appreciative way.
You just highlight all of the things that are happening in a coach's mind as we go into these conversations. And I don't know, I know our coaches know that, but our educators who are being coached, I don't know if they realize how much is going on before we even step into that coaching conversation.
Exactly, Courtney. And this is what I meant when I said earlier, a lot of these ideas is part and parcel of our role as coaches. And I just want to share that more widely. I mean, the other barrier is our own inner dialogue, right? Whatever's going on in our mind. So if you're a coach and you're sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know what to ask next, or I'm not sure what, all of that inner dialogue is actually getting in the way of us giving our full attention to the client. So yeah, absolutely right, Courtney.
Your book introduces 6 core competencies. Which is the most challenging for people to master and why?
Well, I'm going to do 2 if that's okay, because one, it relates to what we were just talking about. One of the skills we talk about is quieting. I think we went for quieting. This is an example where Robert and I did not agree on the word. I wanted to use quietening. And Robert said, no, it's too complicated. Let's just stick with quieting. So I think we've gone with quieting. So one of the skills to be a radical listener is the ability to create a quiet environment for the listening to happen. That has 2 components. One is quietening what's going on in our own mind, like I just mentioned, that kind of quieting the inner dialogue that's going on. But the other is to think about how can we create an environment that's not full of distractions. Now, I know in a school context, that can be a very difficult thing. There's always things going on. But even within that, just to go into a corner somewhere, and those little things that we do of trying to shield the conversation, I think is another way of showing our conversational partner that what they have to say is important to us. And we really want to create that quiet space for those kinds of conversations. The other one I want to share, the other skill, we call it one of the skills that might be challenging for coaches specifically, is interjecting. So one of the things that we think is radical about radical listening is we say, don't just go quiet. Don't just stop talking. Actually be a full participant in the conversation. And what that means is when your conversational partner says something exciting, don't wait until they get to the end of the just jump in and say, oh my goodness, I can't believe that's amazing. Or I can't believe that's going to happen. And the reason for that is to build this sense of rapport. And, I'm a trained coach. I've trained others to become coaches. And I've trained people to not do that. I've said never interrupt. But what I've realized is if somebody says something like that and I don't respond in any way, and I wait, 2 minutes until they've finished what they have to say, and then I go back and say, oh, when you said this 2 minutes ago, it just breaks that sense of being with the other person. So
Mhm.
the interjecting is, and it's all those little nonverbal noises that we make. It could be small words. Of course, we don't want to take the stage from the other person. It's not like we want to jump in and take over the conversation. It's just popping in to show our excitement, to show that we're with them, to demonstrate that we're kind of really connected to what it is they're saying. So maybe that skill it would be a little bit challenging for coaches.
I can definitely see how that would be. And now I'm going to say Christian allows me to hop in and I can acknowledge this in the moment. But it's true. That's part of natural conversation, is to celebrate those moments and not hold on to it for 10 or 15 minutes and then circle back at the end.
And it
You
takes
know,
that nuance and finesse within the conversation to be able to know, like you're saying, just how much and what you can get in there. But sometimes it leverages that conversation to that next level of shared experience or excitement or longevity.
yeah, exactly. It's trying to build up the energy of the conversation by connecting with them. And I like what you said about finesse, because one of the other ideas in our book is the idea of optimal matching. And that does require discernment, the ability for us to pick up what does our conversational partner really want from this interaction? Are they looking for validation? Are they looking for acknowledgement? Or are they looking for a solution, right? So that people do come to us, and sometimes the most helpful thing might be to say, oh, this is what you have to do. Let's say there's an emergency, the person's got something they need to do tomorrow. Picking up that in this scenario, what's most helpful is for me to share something with them. And we use the term optimal matching. I think there's been some research done around this idea of optimal support matching. And what we mean by that is making sure that the way we're listening to the person matches with what's going to be most helpful for our conversational partner. And this brings me to another thing that I've been reflecting on most recently. And this is maybe, um, uh, a little bit counterintuitive, but it's the idea that I want all of us to be careful that fidelity to the intervention doesn't get in the way of what's in the best interest for our clients. And so, sometimes people would say, no, I'm in this coaching mode. I must never do this thing. And that for me means that we've put the fidelity to the intervention above what's best for the client. And I'm sorry if that's going to be a little bit confusing, and it does require the finesse that we've just talked about. But for me, what's most powerful about coaching is that we put the client first. That's really what it's all about. And in terms of the relationship we build with our client, it's based on their belief that I want what's best for them. So if I ever say, well, I know this is best for them, but this intervention I'm using doesn't allow it, I'm just worried that sometimes we're going to put the intervention before the client, and I know that's nobody's intention. So I just wanted to highlight that. And radical listening loosens things up a little bit. There's less rules about radical listening. It has to be this long. You can do radical listening in 2 minutes. You can have a 1 hour radical listening conversation. All of the things that we share, they're very tentative. And really the main takeaways are that we can listen to people in a way that builds rapport and strengthens relationships. And that sometimes, putting the relationship and the rapport first can be really powerful. So that's really the message behind radical listening. And, you know, anywhere we go in the world right now, we are seeing division, and we're seeing arguments, and we're seeing people not in dialogue. And radical listening, hopefully, in a small way, might help to unlock some of those things. Because radical listening says, I'm going to start by trying to validate, understand, and appreciate where you're coming from. And I think that would really help to unlock things, because one of the barriers to listening that I mentioned is believing that I'm right. Imagine I'm talking to somebody else. I think I'm 100% correct. They're telling me about their perspective. Well, logically, if I'm 100% correct, I'm not interested in what they have to say because I think I've got nothing to learn from them. Whereas radical listening, even if we have very different opinions, I would start with, I really want to understand how you're seeing this. And I believe I have something to learn from you. So that for me is really at the heart of radical listening. And I hope it has application for coaches, of course, but I hope it has application more broadly as well.
Well, and you couldn't have teed that up more perfectly. How do you see radical listening influencing relationships beyond coaching, such as in personal relationships or within leadership?
That's great. That's a great question because it's something that I was thinking about. As I said, the motivation for this book is to say radical listening applies in professional contexts, but personal as well. So, and it's the kind of thing you can start doing straight away. And what I mean by that is just try out this idea of thinking, what's my intention for the next interaction I'm going to have? And maybe experiment with going up to somebody to listen to them purely to appreciate them, where you'd go to somebody, let's say it's a colleague at school or in the building where you work, or a colleague another coach. And the whole purpose of the interaction is, hey, tell me how things are going for you. What's going on now? Courtney and Violet, you're podcast hosts. You're already good at doing this. You do this naturally. I think you'd have to be able to do this to be a podcast host as well. But the idea is you can start doing it anywhere and with anyone. You can be doing your shopping and speak to the person who's helping you in that way and just interact like that. But for me, what would be most rewarding is to hear that readers of the book are saying, oh, you know what? I'm applying this to some of the most important relationships that I have. And what I mean is, friends or family. And I think this is really important. And I'll say why. Sometimes with those relationships that we've had for longer, we just kind of get into habits, don't we? Just kind of, we just, we're not as intentional as we could be. Let's say you get home from a long day at work. You might be like, oh, I'm really tired right now. But those people deserve our full attention. So this idea of taking radical listening to just review, how am I listening to my partner, my friend, my family member, and maybe just kind of refreshing that. I'd be delighted if that's the kind of thing that's happening. But I don't want to underplay its importance in the professional sphere, because imagine that the person who manages you, the person who's your manager or who you report to, imagine they listen to you like this. They listen to you in a way that shows that they value you and appreciate you, that they listen to you in a way that builds connection. What our managers in our workplace think of us has a huge impact on our well-being. So if you are a leader listening to this, please just note that listening in this way to the people who report to you can have a transformational impact, not only on their motivation and engagement at work, but on the relationship that you have with them.
I love how you start at the core of those closest relationships, which sometimes are the hardest for us to be able to stop and think about those best practices. So what a wonderful reminder, and all the way out to educational leaders and thought leaders and hopefully world leaders. If we all listened with more human connection in mind, what power that could have.
exactly. And, it got me thinking this little catchphrase of listening is the intervention. That idea of we don't have to listen so that other things happen. Maybe listening is the first step. That's the thing. And yeah, thank you for saying that about the people closest to us. I'd love to think that people might use this book as an opportunity to say, let me just do a little health check. How am I, am I actually listening to those people closest to me in the way that I'd like to be? And it's only because, as we said, we can get into habits and, kind of overlook those really important relationships. So yeah, that's such a great idea is if people do buy this book and read it, I'd be delighted if they're thinking, professionally and personally when they're applying these things.
Well, we have eaten it up all this morning and this afternoon in England. And I have one of our best listeners who is one who's listened to everyone coming over this afternoon. And you have me thinking about my intentions in my conversation with her and just being able to reconnect, since sometimes social media gets us disconnected through text or other things. So that opportunity to really sit down and have a one-to-one conversation, you're getting my schema going. So thank you for that.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you. You're right about social media as well. I think particularly because of developments in AI, particularly because of all the kind of 24/7 social media, really going back to what's really fundamental about being human, that ability for us to communicate with one another. And, again, what's something listeners can do straight away is um, allocate more time to listening. And like I said before, I'm not talking about you need to set aside 2 hours, but, even a 5 minutes, say, I'm just going to allocate this to listen. And I've got this pet thing that I've been talking to Robert about. He thinks it's a little bit silly, but even with pets, and so there might be a whole different thing here about radical listening with our pets. But one of my little bugbears is, well, I don't have a pet because I travel a lot, but I do love dogs and cats. And sometimes I see people walking their dog, let's say. They're walking the dog. And you know how the dogs are excited. They look around to the owner. They're like, I can't believe we're out here. I don't know if that's what they're saying, but well, let's imagine that. But, they turn around and they look up at the owner. And sometimes the owner's on their phone doing some social media thing. And all that dog needs is just that tiny bit of eye contact. So, it might not be exactly radical listening, but it's a bit like that. Every time we listen is an opportunity for connection. And I think sometimes we miss that opportunity.
Well, my dog would agree. She loves to stare me down till I acknowledge her. So she
Good.
appreciates when I listen to her.
Exactly. So you know what I mean? They kind of look up and they want that acknowledgement. And thank you for that.
Yeah.
Courtney and Pickles have a deep rapport and relationship for sure. Some mirror neurons are always going on there. And I would challenge us to also think about our children, because in a very similar fashion, they look for that attention or they look for that moment of understanding. And sometimes you're in the routine or you're trying to get out the door or you're cooking supper. So just, all levels, as you said.
Oh, love it. Absolutely, Violet. 100%. Because that constant refrain from children is, look, I've done this, look at this. And exactly, just needing to be acknowledged and appreciated. Exactly. That's very similar.
And it brings us back to our educational core in the classroom, right? So we've come full circle and we've held you hostage for as long as we could, Christian. So we just always want to dig in deeper with you. But can you tell us some of these rapid fire questions quickly? And first, we know all of our listeners are going to want to know where to get your book and where to connect with you. Can you start with that?
Well, if you're in the US, maybe Barnes and Noble is a great place. I think we're going to be doing a book launch in Barnes and Noble. I think we're going to be doing a book launch at Barnes and Noble on Fifth Avenue, hopefully in March.
Ooh.
But Barnes and Noble, big bookseller. And the other place for pre-ordering or ordering also is Amazon. If you want to know more about the work that I'm doing more broadly, it's my website would be the best place. It's coachonamotorcycle.com. I've also got a YouTube channel at Coach on a Motorcycle, all one word. And really, Violet, that the website and my YouTube channel and my Instagram account also at Coach on a Motorcycle. What I'm really wanting to do there is share as much as possible with as many people as possible and where possible for free. So there's a lot of content on my YouTube channel and also on the website if people wanted to find out more.
You are such an asset to coaching and always lifting others and sharing things freely. I know I have taken many resources from you and taken them forward in my coaching. So thank you for that. And can you tell us what coaching means to you or what facet that you might be most focused on in your own coaching at this moment?
Yeah, I'd like to share my current definition of coaching, which is that coaching is about creating ideal environments for learning. So, and that changes things for me. If I think coaching is about helping people to perform better or to do more, it's slightly different for me than reminding myself that my role as a coach is to create the ideal environment for that person to do their best thinking. So really comes back full circle to coaching is really about creating environments for learning.
Absolutely. And tell us, what's the question that you are relying on most as you're trying to jump into our radical listening? Is there a question or a nuance that you've been relying on lately?
Yeah, the real question is, what's important to you right now? And being interested in that, Violet. It's not just saying, hey, what's going on? And you know that we actually, in the English language, in most places where English is the common language, we ask people, how are you? But I don't think we mean it. It's just a kind of a throwaway phrase. So certainly for radical listening, it's asking questions like that and really caring about the answer.
It's that, how are you doing? Then they're like, fine. How are you doing really? And digging that next layer and keep the probing questions going, right? Tell us, Christian, what have we missed? What did we not ask that you want to share with our listeners that's on the tip of your mindset right now?
Well, I hope it's been kind of implicit in what I've been saying, but I really wanted to share that I appreciate what your listeners do. At the beginning of this conversation, we were just checking in, and I was just saying, well, so grateful to be on this podcast because, as I said, good education for as many people as possible is my kind of the thing that drives me. And for that to happen, we need excellent coaches working with those educators, allowing them to be at their best. So I just wanted to say how much I appreciate coaches and how much I appreciate educators as well. So that's what I wanted to share with everyone.
Well, thank you for being such a force in positive coaching. That's the only way I can see you. I think of Christian von Nieuwerburgh. I'm like positive coaching and just always come out of the conversation with new insights and lifted mindset. So I appreciate you for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much. I always love coming to this podcast. I hope you invite me back when I write my next book.
Yes, please.
Keep writing the books and you're always welcome back.
Thank you, Courtney.
Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you so much.
We want to thank Christian for sharing with us his latest book, Radical Listening, and how this can look and sound when coaching. How might you start to validate and listen to others while you're coaching? Thanks for listening to another episode of C3. Be sure to follow us on social media. C3. Connecting, coaches, cognition. Whose thinking will you mediate today?